Hello there, everybody. This is the new version of Alchemist. You might remember this used to be the Pump Action Cynthia. Cynthia is, of course, my bolt action, and as you can see, there's been a major rework since that. I realized that by sticking with the Cynthia aesthetics and like working off of those files, it was causing a lot of issues with like making space for the bars and stuff, which we'll get to in a bit. But it was quite hard to design around those constraints, so I decided to just start from fresh. It has the same Magwell starting point, I guess you can call it, but it's significantly different at this point. Um, the grip here looks a lot like the Cynthia one, but this is actually the one from Battle Mage because it has dovetails up here instead of screws. Trigger here is from Battle Mage. Bunch of other things are from various other designs from me. I think this bit up here I stole from Foxbat. Apologies for that notification from my phone. I think I stole the muzzle area from Foxbat, and the top rail, these bits in the back and front, are from Battle Mage. Stuff like that. But anyway, major changes to Alchemist. This is now test printing, which is why there's probably printer noises coming through on the recording. But yeah, this is being test printed right now. So, what is Alchemist? Alchemist is the best pump action Springer that I could think of how to make. There's probably ways to make a better one, and I'll probably come back around to that in a few years, but right now, at my current skill level as a designer, this is the best one I think that I can make. So, what is inside of Alchemist? Well, if we pop open this and do a cross-section, hopefully without fusion crashing, there we go. You can see here, in this cross-section here, Alchemist is basically... Alchemist is basically a Cynthia, which is where this plunger and plunger rod comes from, derived from the slab as well. But it's basically Cynthia, and instead of having the threaded rod trigger linkage back here, which goes to a lever, I've used a sear, similar to a caliburn, which should have a better trigger feel. And then I've used ball bearings up front in the priming block thing up here that the priming grip attaches to. That is similar to a game face try-on, but I think that I've improved it slightly with my positioning of 3 bearings instead of 2. It uses a caliburn style ram and a plunger setup, or not plunger setup, a ram and ramrod setup where it has priming bars along the side. If we hide these, you can see it has priming bars along the side, and then it goes into a little thingy back here which holds a metal ram. That's a Talon Claw ram, by the way. But I've improved this ram base quite a bit compared to a Caliburn V3 or Caliburn V4. This should be a lot more durable and easier to print, and it also holds onto the metal ram rod better. Instead of having 2 screws that go into this metal piece here, it has 4. So it has one there, and then mirrored on the other side. So that's better. It has the excellent magwell from Cynthia, which is derived from the skewer magwell. But at this point, I basically chopped off all of the bits that were skewer towards the bottom, and I remade it from scratch because I wanted it to be slightly thicker in some areas, and I wanted a different profile as well. So it's got this sort of chopped angle to it now, which gives you a bit more space up front for your hands, and it just feels nicer. I also made it so that this has a 95mm prime, so like that. And if we move this back, there you go. Approximately that is the prime. That is slightly shorter than a Talon Claw T4 and like a hair longer than an SBL. I think an SBL uses like a 92mm prime. This is 95. And I think a Talon Claw T4 uses like a 110 or 105, something like that. So it's slightly shorter than that. So it should be roughly the same performance as a Talon Claw, but with a slightly shorter prime. Now, the major difference between this and a Talon Claw and this and an SBL, other than the bits I've gone over already with the bearings up here, and aside from construction methods, which we'll get to in a moment, which is this, this takes lynx-sized springs and Talon Claw-sized springs. So it's basically has the wider spring compatibility that a Caliburn-style plunger system doesn't have. An SBL and a Caliburn both have the same issue where you can't use wider springs. In this model right here, this is a normal K25, but a normal wider lynx spring would be about this wide up here. And a Talon Claw plunger head is only wide enough to fit this smaller spring. Now, having a wider spring, it makes it have a better priming experience, I guess you can call it. It's smoother, feels slightly lighter for the same amount of performance. So, by having compatibility for wider springs, as well as having ball bearings inside the priming thing, I'm expecting for this prime to feel incredible. As I said, still test printing this, so it's not fully done yet. The first test print of the Pump Action Cynthia, which got renamed to Alchemist, which is this, it had the ball bearings in the priming thing, but didn't have the new plunger setup. It didn't have this new sear versus a catch. It didn't have this stuff. It just had this. And that felt really nice. So I'm expecting with these improvements, it's going to feel even better, which is going to be awesome. The next major thing to touch on is that this has aluminum bars instead of threaded rods or screws or anything like that. So if we hide all the bits of the body shell, you can see that this uses long-ass aluminum bars right here. So this is sort of similar to the way that a lynx works, where the lynx has 2 aluminum bars along the entire length of the body, 1 pin in the front, 1 pin in the back. But on this, I'm using 2 bars, 1 pin in the back, and then up front it has a bar tensioner. So, it's kind of difficult to explain what a bar tensioner is if you haven't built like a lynx or anything like that, but I'm going to try. On a lynx, you of course have these aluminum bars right here. Imagine that there's 2 of these. I didn't mirror it in this file. But you have 2 aluminum bars right here. In a lynx, you have 1 pin in the front, 1 pin in the back. If you have slightly wonky print tolerances and some of your parts are slightly shorter or slightly longer, you can have wiggle in between the bars because there's nothing squeezing all the parts together like in a threaded rod blaster. With threaded rods, you have generally 3 if you're doing a Caliburn style thing, and then you have nuts that compress all of the parts together and keep it nice and tight and solid. But on a lynx, it doesn't have any sort of tensioning system, so while it is very sturdy, it can be a slight bit wobbly, and that's why you have printed shims that you can place in between parts as like little spacers on the lynx. But on this, I have added a bar tensioning system, which is this bit up here. So if we put all these parts back in place, you can see that under that, there is a bolt here. Now, what that does is it pulls the aluminum bars forwards a bit, which pulls them against this pin, which pulls them against this part. So this part is kind of squeezing everything on the bars forwards, keeping it nice and tensioned like on a threaded rod blaster. So this has the best of both worlds. It has the sturdiness and strength of aluminum bars, but it has the compression of a threaded rod blaster. So it's very good in theory. Again, haven't fully printed this yet. And again, the Pump Cynthia did this same sort of setup where it had a pin in the back and a tensioner in the front, but the tensioner on this is a lot better. On the Pump Cynthia, I had basically a bolt going through the same sort of shaped thing, but it was pressing up against a solid face right about here. So it was pushing against this, pulling all this way. But on this, I have it pulling all of the bars and stuff this way, pushing against the muzzle with the head of the bolt. So that should be a lot better. And I also have this little printed mini wrench thing. This bolt has both a hex head and a slot, so you could do it with a flathead screwdriver, but whatever. I made this little thingy just to try out. So having the aluminum bar there instead of threaded rods means that I can also, on top of having the better sturdiness and better strength of the aluminum bars, I can also have quick swap springs with one takedown pin. So if you want to swap the springs, for example, you would loosen the tensioner. You'd loosen this up here just a little bit. Then you would take out this pin here. So you'd slide this out the end. And then all of these parts right here and the stock, all of this is one solid bit made out of several parts, but they're all connected with screws. So all of this will slide off the back. Ignore this. And that, and that, and that. And the sear comes off with all of that as well. So it's kind of like that. All that stuff comes off with only that one pin, because up here, the Picatinny rail is also dovetailed in place. So it's still sturdy, but it can pull off the back. Then you just swap your spring. You just take that out, slap in a new one. If you need to do stuff with your plunger, you can do that. You can take that out. If you need to do stuff with your plunger tube, you can also take that out. You can do all the maintenance that you need to do on a blaster, just like that. And then if you want to reassemble it, you just line up all that stuff and push it back forwards, put back in the pin, and then retighten the tensioning system. And then to swap barrels on this, I'm using the same collet system, collet nut, little twisty thingy, that I have on like the Silly Scar and on the Silly Pistol, Fox Bat, Cynthia, all of those blasters I've worked on. So it has this little nut here. You just loosen that, it comes off. Ignore this smaller one. And then you can just pull all this out the front. Just comes right off. Now, an improvement between Fusion trying to crash. An improvement between this and the previous prototype, again, is I have added some O-rings back here, where if I do this, you can see I have some O-rings back here around the barrel. This is sort of like a lynx, but I'm not using these O-rings to seal the barrel. On a lynx, you seal around the barrel to get the air pressure into the barrel. On this, I'm using these O-rings around the barrel to keep it in place. So this should always have the barrel centered. It should always keep the barrel in place very well. Like, it shouldn't loosen because there's only one O-ring in the front. It should stay in place beautifully. And then if you want to swap barrels, you just loosen that nut in the front and just pop that out. And then if that doesn't work for you for some reason, I have added a backup hard barrel mount. So this is similar to what Slug used to do in the Caliburn style blasters, but his bolt was a lot larger. This is roughly similar to the size of bolt that a Lynx uses to keep its barrel in place. But yeah, you can just tighten this down onto the barrel, kind of lock it in place. It wouldn't go that far, and it would kind of go like that. It would mar your barrel. It would make it not look as nice. It would scratch it up a little bit, but it would keep it in place really nicely. But that's optional, because you have this nut at the front that you can use if you don't want to ruin your barrel. Not ruin your barrel, but, scratch up your barrel a little bit. Like if you have a nice anodized barrel. And then you might notice that this muzzle has the same sort of a dovetail looking thing as the front. So if you want to take off the entire front of the blaster, you can just loosen the tensioning thing all the way. You can take this out, and I want to mention that taking off the front end is not needed at any point, really, unless you need to like clean off the inside from like, I don't know, buildup of gunk or something like that. But it should never be necessary, but I decided might as well do it. So anyway, you can take out that screw completely, and then all of this should just slide off the front like that. There you go. And you would probably take out the barrel before doing that. But then you have the bar tensioner staying in place there, and you can take out your priming block here. You can do any maintenance that you need to do there. You can, I don't know, polish the bearings if they have gunk on them or anything like that. And then if you want to reassemble it, you just push on everything from the front, put back in that bolt, and then you're done. So that basically has both ends of the blaster, maintenance-wise, done with barely any tools, which I'm quite happy with. So if you need to clean out your barrel shroud, or if you need to clean off the tip of the ram, you can just do what I just showed you, take off the front end. And if you need to clean out your plunger tube, or swap your spring, or do anything with your plunger, you can just take out that pin in the back and take all of that off and maintenance it. Quite happy with how that turned out. I think that is pretty much everything that I wanted to touch on in this video. This is sort of like a context video for when I have the first prototype done. And as I mentioned, the first prototype is currently printing. So when I have the first prototype, I'll make videos on that. But just wanted to do a little progress thing of this current setup. Two last things that I wanted to mention. This 95mm priming setup up here works quite well with a vertical front grip because it has this little space here in between the magwell and the back of the Picatinny there, because it has this sort of slanty shape there. That means that you can use a vertical front grip here, and the back of your thumb shouldn't hit the magwell when you're priming it back. Like if it was like that, your thumb would have nowhere to go. But there's plenty of space there at this point. And you would probably want to mount it in the first few bits of the Picatinny, but whatever. Should work very nicely. And of course it would be, the files come with this pump grip here, which is from Cynthia. And then the other thing I want to mention is the stock. In this current setup, which I'm doing for the prototype, I have this stock here. It's printed. And then it has this sort of buffer tube style thing. I added a smiley face to it because it needed to have these two holes here for bolts that attach it to the rest of the thing. But I added a smiley face there because it's nice. Looks like a little lizard guy. If you look at the other end, I added a second smiley face there. He's much happier. Yeah. Anyway, this stock has several adjustment notches, and it's held in place by a takedown pin. I didn't want to deal with like a printed latch to extend the stock, just kind of iffy. And you shouldn't really be extending your stock back and forth a lot. It's not something that you need to do quickly during a game, preferably. So you can just take out the pin, set it to what you want, and then put the pin back in. And then this part right here that you saw me hide previously, this bit right here is actually just a spacer there. So if you extend the stock, let's say out one notch, and you want to make it look good without having this sort of gap there, like that, you can print this little spacer, fills up that gap, continues the contours of the shell. Looks pretty good. And then I am planning on doing a end strike stock lug there, because that cover needs to be there to cover up the plunger rod when it goes out. Plunger rod goes like this, kind of sticks out like that. So it does need to have this cover here anyway. So I'm going to do an end strike barrel, or not an end strike barrel lug, end strike stock lug, and it's going to have that sort of big tube coming off the end, like the Recon and stuff like that does have. So it's going to be roughly similar to that. That should work pretty well. And then on this current prototype, the stock has adjustment notches of 12 millimeters. So this is its shortest length right here, and if I get a caliburn real quick, one moment, caliburn, oh wait, caliburn, there we go. Okay, if we get a caliburn here, I highlight the stock again, you can see that its shortest distance is shorter than the caliburn stock, and you can see that the grip is roughly the same length from there to the caliburn grip is basically the same as the grip that I'm using here in terms of distance from the grip to the stock and the grip to the magwell, so it's roughly the same. But anyway, it's lined up, so I can make this comparison. And then if we go back here, 12 is its first notch, or I guess first adjustment notch. This is zeroed out, and then it goes in segments of 12. So 12 times 1, 12 times 2 is slightly longer than a caliburn, which should be very comfortable. Most people find the caliburn just a hair too short, so a hair longer than that should feel quite nice. And then I think it goes out to, that's the third, that's the fourth, and I think that is the last notch. Yes, that's the last notch in the adjustment. So yeah, you can have it a good bit longer than a caliburn if you want it to, as you can see there. So yeah, that is the Alchemist. If you have any questions about this blaster, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will answer questions. Expect to see video of the first prototype of this new setup at some point in the next few weeks. Yeah. All right. Have a nice day.